Hi everyone and welcome to another video. It's snowing in Seoul today, which got me feeling a little bit nostalgic because the first time I ever came to Korea it had snowed quite a lot, and it got me wanting to have a little chat about how to navigate friendships while you're living abroad. So I want to talk a little bit about the mistakes that I made while I was living in Korea for the first time and how you can avoid making the same mistakes I did, because I learned some very valuable lessons while in my early days here in Korea trying to make friends. Also, just as a disclaimer, any names that I mention in this video are going to be fake names. They're not actually the people's real names. So the first time that I ever set foot in Korea, I was an EPIC teacher with the EPIC program. You have to meet at the airport and they take you to what's known as the EPIC orientation. It's basically a week-long orientation where you take lessons on Korean culture and all of that good stuff so that you don't feel like you're just thrown in at the deep end. This EPIC orientation is really good for meeting friends, obviously, because you're put with all of the other EPIC teachers, so you're with people who are going through the exact same situation as you. This is where I met most of my friends. And then at the end of orientation is when you get given your placement. They don't actually tell you where you're placed until you are on the last day of orientation. You get given the name of your school and your location. So on the last day of orientation, I was given my location and I found out that I was placed in Yangpyeong in Gyeonggi-do. At the time, I hadn't met anyone at orientation who was also placed in Yangpyeong. The people I had gotten closest to during orientation were definitely nowhere near me, and so I was a little bit panicky at this point. Eventually I came to find out that there were two other teachers who were placed in the exact same city as me, and this is how I met my first real friend in Korea. We'll call her Lucy. So Lucy was an absolute angel. I still think of Lucy now and hope that she's doing well, because she was honestly just such a genuine, warm-hearted, kind person to be around, and she had this very maternal vibe to her. Literally the day of or the day after, I can't really remember, the day that we got given our apartments and we were kind of settling in, she actually messaged me and asked me to go over to her house that night so that she could make dinner for me, which was honestly so nice of her. And obviously moving to a new country and taking on a new job that I'd never done before, I had never done any kind of teaching before, it's a very new and very stressful situation to be in at first. And so having Lucy felt so nice because she was in the exact same situation as me, and on top of that she was literally about 5 or 10 minutes away from where I lived, and she would always invite me over to her place so that she could make dinner, which was so nice of her, and it just made me feel like I had somebody there, and it just made the stress and all of the anxiety that I had around being in this new place just so much easier. It was really clear to me that Lucy had come to Korea for all of the right reasons. She was very interested in traveling around Korea and experiencing all of Korean culture and everything good that Korea had to offer. She definitely wasn't the type to go out clubbing or drinking or anything like that either. And in hindsight, I wish that I had spent more time with Lucy. So I wanted to start out strong with Lucy and start out on the positive note. Now we're gonna like slowly descend into not so good. So I met a girl, we're going to call her Ruby. Yeah, Ruby. We'll go with Ruby. She was actually one of the people that I spoke to the most at EPIC orientation, but she was placed in Paju, which is very far up north, and very far away from Yangpyeong. We had both exchanged our cacao IDs at orientation and said that we would keep in touch with each other. Both of us also had spoken a lot at orientation about how we both really wanted to be placed in Seoul. Seoul, as you can imagine, is the most competitive city to get a teaching job in. So we unfortunately missed the ball and we were both placed in Gyeonggi-do. But as I mentioned, we had exchanged cacao IDs, and Ruby had said to me, we should meet up in Seoul on the weekends. So the first weekend that I spent in Seoul with Ruby, we decided we would try and go clubbing. I was very excited to try clubbing here in Korea because back in the UK, clubbing is really not that safe at all, and I hardly went clubbing in the UK because of this. But I'd always enjoyed going to clubs. I just enjoyed listening to music, dancing, having a good time. And our first night out, I will say, was really fun. I had a great time. Obviously, as I mentioned, clubbing in Korea is safer than it is in the UK, but no country is 100% safe, so obviously I was still very careful. But in general, I had a much better time in Korea because I did feel like I didn't have to be so hyper vigilant 24/7 all of the time about who was around me and what was going on at any given time. So at first it was, yeah, really fun. And then about a month in to us meeting up every weekend in Seoul, it became clear to me that her reason for going clubbing was very different from my reason for going clubbing. It became very clear that she would go clubbing specifically to meet men. Whereas, as I mentioned, my reason for going clubbing was that I hadn't really had much opportunity to do so in England, and I just enjoyed the vibe of clubbing. I just really enjoyed the atmosphere and just, you know, going, having a drink, having a dance, having a good time, basically. But before anyone says anything, I am definitely not shaming anyone who chooses to go clubbing for a different reason. If your reason for going clubbing is to meet people and to have a good time with people, that's entirely your choice. It's nothing to do with me at the end of the day. But I personally wasn't there for that reason. At first, I thought it was completely okay that we would go clubbing with different intentions, but it became clear to me that it wasn't okay because she cared more about meeting men than she did for my safety. It became clear to me that she would be more than willing to put my safety at risk in order to have a good time with ex-man that she had met that night. So one night we had gone out clubbing in Hongdae. Hongdae was honestly an absolute trap for me. This is honestly partly my fault. I had such fun while I was clubbing that I would just keep going even though I knew that it really wasn't good for me. So this one night I went out clubbing as usual with her in Hongdae, and we had gone to a club that we used to go to pretty often. This is the first time that I had that realization that she didn't care about my safety at all and was willing to put that at risk in order to have a good time with a guy. So in this club, she had seen a guy that she thought was attractive enough, I guess. Not really sure. She had turned to me and she had said, "Oh my god, he looks like ex K-pop idol." She did this a lot. She would just say that this random guy in this club looked like insert K-pop idol here. But regardless, she went to talk to this guy and she grabbed me to go with her, and said guy, who did not look like a K-pop idol, but we'll say that he did for her sake, she had grabbed me and we'd gone over, and he'd also brought a friend. And so she was talking to this guy and I was just standing there awkwardly with his friend. And so the whole time they were talking, this friend of his kept turning to me and also trying to make conversation with me. And I've got to be honest, I feel a little bit mean looking back on this, but I was so angry at the time and like so not interested in this guy that I just kept giving him the shortest one-word answers that I could possibly manage. He would ask me, you know, where are you from? I'd be like, England. And then he'd be like, oh, England, really cool. So, you know, why are you in Korea? And I'd just be like, teaching. And this is how our conversation went for pretty much the entire time. And like I said, looking back, I do feel mean, but I was just so pissed and I just wanted to leave and go home at this point, honestly. Like, I had come out with her, with Ruby, to have fun with Ruby. I had come to have a girls' night, that's what I thought this was, and she was here just talking to this guy and putting me in this really awkward situation where I just wanted to leave. At this point too, I had drunk enough that you would think this conversation, this one-way conversation that was happening between me and this guy's friend wouldn't have felt awkward, but it did. That's how awkward this was. The awkwardness reached a point where I was like, no, I literally physically am cringing at this point, so I cannot stand here any longer. I have to leave. So I left to go to the bar to get another drink. And then while I was getting said drink at the bar, a different Korean guy had come over to me and he began speaking to me. Again, asking very generic questions, just where are you from, all of that stuff. I'd looked back over to where I left Ruby because obviously I'm still concerned about her safety. I want her to be safe. So I looked back over to check that she was still with that guy. And when I made eye contact with her, she looked pissed. She came over to me and was like, oh, who's this? Who's this guy who's chatting with you? And to be honest with you, I didn't know. Because I hadn't even got this guy's name. Again, no interest. I hadn't even asked him his name. I didn't know. So I just like shrugged and was like, I don't know. And then she was like, oh God, like Korean guys, they only like you because you're blonde. What? It was so out of the blue and I was just shocked, honestly. I had no idea. I didn't even have a comeback because I just had no idea what to say. I was just so shocked. So I just kind of laughed and kind of made her assume that I took it as a joke. And then not long after, we just left the club and we just went back to our Airbnb together, and then we both just left the next day. So this was a gigantic red flag that Ruby had showed me, but because I was so desperate for human connection and not to be lonely here, I kind of ignored a lot of the stuff that she was doing just because I was in Korea and I needed friends. So the next gigantic red flag that showed was another night where, again, we had gone to Hongdae. This time, I actually was pretty excited because it wasn't just me and Ruby. We were also going with mutual friends of ours. It was a pretty large group. There were about 8 of us in total. And so I actually started out the evening with high hopes because I was like, I don't have to just be with Ruby, and if Ruby wants to go and have some fun with a guy, I don't have to be put into any awkward situation this time. There's a big group of us. She can just go do her thing and I can, you know, stay with our friends. Then turned to me and was like, oh, I want to dance, let's go and dance. So she grabbed my arm, we headed to the dance floor away from our group of friends, so it was just me and Ruby. But before long, surprise, surprise, she had locked eyes with yet another potential candidate. And before long, she was just making out with this guy. They were both sucking face and I wasn't gonna stick around. So I headed back to our group of friends and I was like, this is pretty nice actually. I can just, you know, dip out. And then before long I had the urge to reapply my makeup because for some reason, no matter how drunk I am, I'm always like, I've got to retouch. Headed to the bathroom, reapplied my lippy, did all that stuff, headed back out, headed downstairs, and I couldn't find Ruby. And then one of the mutual friends that we had come out with came over to me and was like, have you seen Ruby? I haven't seen her for quite a while. And then I came to find out that none of the group of people that we had come with had seen her for quite some time, which initially I wasn't that worried about because I was thinking she's probably further into the crowd. This place was so crowded that I was just thinking she's probably in the depths of this crowd somewhere and we just can't see her. But I started to get I started to get quite worried because I realised that in my drunken state I hadn't really looked at the guy that she had been with, and so God forbid, but if anything bad happened to her, I wouldn't be able to describe the guy. So I began messaging her, just sending her texts saying, you know, where are you okay? And these messages were going through and they were immediately being read but not responded to. So I started to panic thinking, what if he has her phone? So at this point I began phoning her, I began calling her. And again, these phone calls were going through, they were immediately being answered and then they were being cut off. The panic level started to rise because I was thinking, oh my god, what if he does actually have her phone? Like, I don't know the situation. What if he's taken advantage of her? I don't know anything. And then eventually, finally, she answered the phone and my heart just sank into my stomach because I could just hear her sobbing and she was hyperventilating, crying. The kind of crying where you can't really understand what they're trying to say because like they can't breathe. My panic, my stress levels at this point in time were through the roof. I was like, oh my god, something really bad has happened to her. But finally I managed to make out that she was trying to tell me she was in the alleyway next to the bar that we had been at. And so I made my way over to the alleyway and I saw her crouched on the floor with her head on her knees crying. I felt physically sick at this point. My heart was pounding out of my chest and I ran over to her and I picked her up. I asked her like, oh my god, are you okay? What happened? Tell me what happened. And it took her a while to calm down enough that I could understand what she was saying. And she looked me dead in the eye and said, he's married. All of this was because the man that she had met all of an hour, maximum 2 hours ago, turned out to be married. I was put through so much stress. Honestly, this should have been the final straw for me. Looking back, this moment right here should have been the moment when I just cut her off and I cut my losses and said, you deal with that, I don't want to deal with it anymore. But unfortunately, I did not. Part of me just felt so sorry for her that I just couldn't bring myself to let her go, even though I knew that this friendship was really, really bad for me. So I continued to see her. This one night, again, we had arranged to go out. Ruby had said to me explicitly that she was extremely sorry for what she had done in the past. She had told me, you know what, let's just go out, just me and you. Let's just have a fun time. It'll be just me and you this time, I promise. And my dumb, gullible self believed her. So I allowed myself to believe this lie and we went out and yet more absolute fuckery ensued. So we went out, we were having actually a decent time, but surprise, surprise, she fucked off again. I had turned my back to go and get a drink, and the second my back was turned, she had fucked off with some guy. However, this time, she'd actually taken the key to our Airbnb with her. So not only had she left me on my own yet again, she had fucked off with the key to our Airbnb and essentially locked me out for the night. And at this point, I had no place to stay. She had actually cared so little about me and about my safety that she was willing to lock me out for the entire night. I had to ask myself, why are you putting up with this? If you were back in England, you would never put up with this behaviour from one of your friends. If I had met Ruby in the UK, the first night that she fucked off and left me on my own would have been the last night I ever saw her. But because I was in Korea and I was so desperate to make friends, to keep friends, to have people who I could relate to, I kept holding on to this friendship that was just not good for me in any way. It was just taking more and more joy away from my life, if anything. Ruby taught me that actions definitely speak louder than words. She would constantly tell me that I was her best friend, that I meant everything to her, that I was like a sister to her, all of this stuff. But then when we would go out together, she would just show through her actions that she actually didn't care about me at all. There's honestly still a lot more that I want to talk about on this topic, so there will be a part 2 to this video. But the main thing that I want you to take away from this is, if a friend is telling you that they care about you and that you mean so much to them, but then their actions are doing or showing the complete opposite, please, 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 for your own safety and for your own mental health, just cut that person out of your life, because they do not care for you. They do not really see you as a friend. If they truly saw you as their friend, they wouldn't be willing to put your safety at risk, and especially not for a man that they met 5 minutes ago. If you like this video, please make sure to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you again in my next one. Bye!